Keeley is actually from Texas, and I've got a little bit of her bio here, which I'm going to read to you guys. Keeley and I have a mutual friend, Brandy Shotwell, that actually spoke, I think it was last time, or maybe it was 2 meetings ago, whatever it is. Super successful mortgage broker out of the Fort Worth, Dallas area. I asked her, hey, who do you think is really, really good? And she recommended Keeley. So Keeley and I talked a little bit, and she was kind enough to come and kind of join us. So Keeley's last name is Hubbard. She's a multifamily syndicator and investor. She's also a sales coach for business owners and professionals who are looking to break through to the top of their field. Her primary focus has always been helping others achieve their financial life goals. Keeley's desire to help people start at a young age continued through the years as she graduated from TCU. What is TCU?
It's Texas Christian University.
Okay, all right. I knew the T was for Texas.
It's a bigger deal in Texas for football.
Oh, all right. So she got out of there, pursued a career in financial education, 7 years in the industry as an executive, passion for people and skilled communication drove unprecedented growth at the company she was at. She's now a managing partner of Hubbard Capital, a multifamily investment firm founded by Keeley and her dad, which I think is awesome to have a family business, responsible for acquisitions, investor relations, integrity, transparency, and delivering results to investors at the core of every decision they make. And when Keeley isn't sales coaching, touring properties, or underwriting deals, you can find her hanging out with her big, crazy, fun family. That is awesome. I'm so happy that I'm not the only one with a crazy family.
Crazy in the best way.
Yes, absolutely. I agree 100%. So so it is all yours. I'll just kind of hand it off again. Thanks so much for being with us.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I want to share my screen here. So I want to make sure that you guys can see that.
Yep.
All right. You can. Perfect.
There you go.
Perfect. Okay. Awesome. And then I'm looking for the chat box. I guess it probably won't let me do it in presentation mode. That's all right. We'll figure out the tech side of it later. But yeah, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you, James, for that. I have been in sales for 12 years. I'm super passionate about it. I'm also a multifamily syndicator, like you mentioned, and there's been a lot of surprising crossover between the two in just working with a lot of syndicators who probably never had sales training before, need to raise capital, don't really know how to talk to investors. So that's really become one of my passions. Something that you will learn about me is I say y'all a lot. I don't think it's possible for me to talk without using that. So you're just probably gonna have to deal with it. It's in my vocabulary. I'm a 7th generation Texan. And I also talk pretty quickly, but it's also because I'm trying to over deliver and give you guys a ton of value. It's impossible for me to teach you everything that I know about sales. In about 30 minutes is what we've got here, but I'm going to do my best to give you as much value as possible and give you some really tangible strategies that you can actually take and use going forward as you begin to build your investor network. So let's dive in here. The first thing that I want to ask of you guys is to have an open mind as we go through this. Some of the things that I may say to you is probably going to be the exact opposite of what you've heard about sales or believe to be true about sales. And that's really why I've been very successful in my sales career and also helping coaching business owners is we do the exact opposite of probably typical salesperson behavior. And because of that, we're able to work with investors who really learn to trust us, become raving fans, and invest in many deals going forward. So I'm all about integrity. I believe that sales is something that you do for somebody, not to somebody. And that's an important foundational concept that we'll make sure that we have as an underlying theme as we go through this. The second thing I need you to do is I need you to participate, especially because we're online, and I actually just found the chat box. So if you can put your fingers on that keyboard and give me a yes if you're out there and you're engaged and you're listening. It sounds silly, but one of my mentors taught me that the more engaged you are when you're listening to a presentation, you're absorbing more and you're actually learning more and you will retain more because of that. So I'm going to ask you guys to be typing stuff throughout this and just bear with me. I promise it's in your best interest. And in exchange for you doing that, I have a gift for you, and it is a playbook. So a lot of times when I do these trainings, I found that people are frantically taking notes and writing, trying to get a lot of the talk tracks and the communication side of things. And because that they're not listening to what I'm saying. And so I want to give you confidence that all the things that I'm teaching you today, I've already put into a playbook. So there's additional stuff, extra notes inside of the slides that I'll give you after this. So you can take that home, study it, and start implementing it with your business. All right? If that sounds good, give me a yes again in the chat box. Oh, you guys rock. Okay, great. Perfect. So I've noticed, James, did I do that red thing on the screen? What is that down there?
I don't know. I just saw it as well. I'm not sure what it is. If someone is trying to share, if you guys could not share, I don't think you can. But I don't know where it came from. I have no idea.
I grabbed a drawing tool on accident. Oh well, we'll just ignore it for now. But one of the biggest challenges for most syndicators is the lack of confidence in the skill set to raise capital. And the first thing that I would say is that it's not your fault, because most people that dive into the multifamily industry don't come in with a sales skill set. They've never been formally trained in sales. A lot of the people that I work with have an engineer or an IT background that usually attracts them to multifamily. They're really good with numbers. They love analyzing and the strategic aspect of things, but the people side of things isn't really a skill set that they've been taught before. So the first thing I would let you know is it's not your fault. The other thing that I want to build a foundation on, like I mentioned before, I believe that, sales is something that you do for somebody, not to somebody. And I've often found that when you use that word sales, a lot of people, shy back from it, especially if they're not a professional in the sales industry. And it's usually because sales has a negative connotation to it. I remember being in active sales for years, and it wasn't really something that you told people when they asked you what you do for a living when you're sitting next to them on the plane. You usually don't say I'm in sales because most people hate salespeople. But what I want to show you is that you can be super confident raising capital and develop some simple communication strategies where you don't ever feel like you're selling, because really that's what this is. It's just learning how to be a better communicator. And one of the reasons that I mentioned before that people shy away from sales is because nobody wants to be this guy. This is what people typically think of when they think of salespeople. And I hear a lot from syndicators, I don't want to feel like I'm pitching my deal to my friends and family, or that I'm pushing them into something. And so I just want you guys to type into the chat box, what are some of the things that the characteristics of typical salespeople when you think of being in a sales situation? What are some of the yes, pushy. That's a good one. Liar, sneaky. And I kind of, I put the worst type salesperson on there, which we're all familiar with, used car salesman. Untruthful, con artist, self-interested, always upselling. Oh, Eric, good one. So Eric said outgoing and friendly. And that's a big piece here that I want to cover, because a lot of times people think that for us to be successful in sales, we've got to be this bubbly personality and be super friendly and know our product really well, or our investment, right? Because in this case, we're talking to investors. So know multifamily inside and out, all the features and benefits of it, and be really friendly and talk to a bunch of people. And that's how you raise capital. And I would tell you that that's probably the furthest thing from the truth. So if you're not a bubbly person, I want to give you some confidence in here that that's probably a good thing. You don't have to be bubbly. You probably would be surprised if I told you that I'm really not a bubbly person. If you talk to my friends and family, I'm what you call an introverted extrovert. It's like you turn it on when you need to be engaging with people. But for the most part, a lot of people's personalities that are successful in sales, that's not their, their natural, the natural way they go about things. So I want you to feel like you can be yourself and still be successful in this. So don't ever think that you've got to change your personality to be somebody else. So again, confidence in raising capital is going to come from learning simple, and replace that word sales with communication strategies. It's becoming a better communicator. One of my mentors always said to me, Keeley, sales is just having disarmingly honest conversations with people and cutting through all the junk that gets in the way where people feel like they're being sold. Get rid of all that so you can actually have meaningful conversations, and so you can help somebody with your product, which in our world, this is multifamily investing. So the other foundational thing that I want to lay here is your belief system. And 80% of our success in multifamily investing, in any business, in life, is your psychology. It's your mindset. Only 20% of it is mechanics. And you wonder why there's people that are, extremely successful and others that struggle. And it's usually their mindset or their belief system about what they do. And if you are an existing multifamily syndicator, or an aspiring multifamily syndicator, this is going to be 80% of your success right here. And I want you to realize if you can take on that belief system that I'm doing people a disservice if I don't talk about what I do. If you can adopt that belief system, then it's not going to be hard for you to talk to investors. And if you're an existing multifamily syndicator, if you truly believe that your investments and what you offer people is the best thing out there, better than putting their money in the stock market, give me a yes in the chat box. You truly believe that you're helping people build generational wealth and you're helping them with cash flow. And yes, exactly. So you guys believe in what you do. And so if we believe in what we do, we're hurting people by not sharing it. So we've got to start with our belief system. And I'd encourage you to think about your belief system in all aspects of multifamily. Somebody sent me an email the other day. It was on LinkedIn. I hadn't met him before. And he just said, hey, Keeley, I'd love to hear about, some of the deals that you've put on hold because of COVID. In my mind, I thought, that's a belief system, right? We're not putting deals on hold because of COVID. We're out there submitting offers. There's great deals out there and we're finding them. So you have to have that belief system about the economy, about investors. If you believe that nobody wants to invest right now because of what's going on with COVID, you're probably not going to find any investors. So we've got to really evaluate our belief system and make sure that we've got a supportive belief system and something that's going to help drive and push us forward. And we are doing people a disservice if we don't talk about what we do. So once we've got that right, mindset, and we realize that sales is something that we do for somebody, not to somebody, then we can talk about some of these strategies. So what I did was I put together 5 simple strategies that I think that you can learn, easily take away and implement into your business. Now, there's 5 here, but I want you to be thinking about as we go through these, what's the one thing, right? If you could just take away one thing from this session that would make you better at raising capital, that would make you a better business owner, I want you to be looking for that. Because not all of these are gonna click with each of you. But if you can take away one thing that would make this whole session worth it, I'm gonna ask you what it is at the end. So I wanna start with networking tips. And I know that right now we're doing a lot of stuff virtually, which is great, but COVID's not gonna last forever, and we're all eventually gonna get to hang out and see each other in person again. And so you get to brush up on some of those skill sets and build some of those skill sets. And when you go back into the networking world, you're that much more successful and efficient with your time. So let's touch on some of those. One of the questions that I get the most is, how do I start the conversation? I mentioned to you earlier that I may look like an extrovert, and I do when I teach, because I've got to stay engaging. You guys would be bored out of your mind if I wasn't engaging and projecting my voice. But normally in a big networking type setting, I'm kind of the one that would rather just probably sit by myself and have a cup of coffee. So networking for a lot of people can be uncomfortable, especially you walk into a room and you don't know anybody. And so one of the easiest ways to start the conversation is the tip that I want to give you. And I use it all the time, and it helps me in every situation. And I say, hey, James, I got to tell you, I'm new to this. I don't know anybody here. Can you help me out? And I promise you, every single time, whoever you're talking to will at least tell you why they're there. They'll introduce themselves to you. If they know somebody else, they introduce you to somebody else. Especially in these types of settings, I find myself doing this when I'm networking outside of real estate events. Like maybe you're at a Chamber of Commerce event, or you're meeting with business owners, or another place where there might be investors, and you don't know a whole lot of people. This is a great way to just kind of break the ice. So just walk up to somebody and ask for help. In sales, I teach it. It's called the dummy curve. And it's not coming in as perfectly scripted, perfectly slick, because nobody likes that, right? We're all human. So we might as well admit, hey, I'm kind of in a bind here. I don't know anybody. Can you help me out? So this is a great way to open the conversation. The other thing that I want to mention to you when you're networking is have a goal in mind when you go into these events, because we're all busy, right? We don't have time to go to 5 networking events a week. But if we could target, maybe your target is I want to go to 2 or 3 networking events per month, you need to have a goal when you show up to those networking events. And for mine, in my mind, it's I need 5 business cards. It's 5 cards in and out, right? 5 meaningful conversations, 5 meaningful connections. Get those 5 business cards and get out of there, because we got a lot of stuff to do, right? We got a business to build. We got investors to talk to. And sometimes we think that we have to have the meaningful conversation at the networking event where it's a long and drawn out 35, 40-minute conversation, and it doesn't. You can have a really great conversation with somebody in 5 to 10 minutes, get their business card, and follow up with them afterwards. So I want to give you the best questions that you can ask somebody, simple questions when you meet somebody for the first time. These are some of my favorites. And I want you to notice here that I don't start off talking about myself. Have you ever met somebody, and I want you to type yes in the chat box, have you ever, if you've experienced this, have you ever met somebody that, you talk to them for maybe 30 minutes or so and they walk away and you're like, man, I really like that guy or I really like that woman, and you don't know a thing about them. You have no idea anything about them. Yes, okay, so y'all have experienced this before, right? All we know is their name. Why do we like them so much? If you had to guess, why do we like them so much? Anybody know? What did they let us do? Yes, Brandy, you're onto something. They let us talk about ourselves for 30 minutes, right? We're all human. It's natural. We love to talk about ourselves. So I want to encourage you, when you're in a networking event, I want you to focus your energy and time on other people. Ask meaningful questions. Learn about them. Ask them, hey, what brought you here? What do you do? And I also like to ask, who are you trying to meet? Because that really gives you an idea of who's their ideal client. You can see if there's a potential fit there, right? If they could be a potential investor, if they could be somebody that that you need to meet for your multifamily business. The other thing that I want to just give you a tip here, and I want you to think about this. We don't have time to cover it in this training. I've done a whole nother training on this. But you need to have a really good explanation of what you do when somebody asks you. The last thing you want to say is, I'm a multifamily syndicator. Because if you're not in a real estate event, what does that mean to somebody who has no clue what a syndicator is, right? And so people start to tune out. So you want to have a really good one-liner that helps them understand and identify with what you do. Whenever I'm at a networking event, I say, how most people are stressed about their finances and retirement right now. I help them invest in real estate so they can retire with confidence. I work with business owners, investors, people that are building their retirement accounts, people that are trying to conserve and preserve their retirement accounts. So I just want you to think about what's your answer when you go to a networking event and somebody says, what do you do? So we want to avoid all the industry jargon because it will typically, it turns people's brains off. And we want to keep them focused and engaged. The best way to transition, I don't want you to read ahead on that. Have you ever, and tell me in the chat box, have you ever been to a networking event where you got stuck in a conversation for 30 or 45 minutes and whoever you're talking to is really nice, but they're not your ideal client. They're not who you need to be talking to. And in your peripheral, you see all these other people that you need to be focusing on. Has this ever happened to anybody? It's just me. Okay, good. So you've been stuck in conversations before too. Well, I want to give you a strategy that will help you get out of that conversation in a nice way and help you start talking to other people. So here's what I do. I just say, hey, James, and I'm not saying James is not somebody I want to connect with because he is, but James is just the name I'm going to use for now. I would say, hey, James, I know that you probably need to make your way around other conversations. I love our discussion. I'd love to continue it further. Do you have a card? Right? So it's like, I'm just telling him, hey, I know you probably need to make your way around in the networking event and have some other conversations too. I'd love to continue our discussion further. I really enjoyed it. Do you have a card? And exchange cards, but don't just exchange cards and put it in your pocket and walk away. You want to follow up. If it's a conversation of somebody that you want to follow up with, it's an ideal client. And your strategy is go in, get 5 cards, and get out. And you've talked to this person for 10 or 15 minutes. You think you want to follow up their potential investor, then let them know. Say, hey, I'll give you a call on Thursday. How does that sound? Like, give them a specific day that you're going to give them a call if you want to follow up with them. And make sure that, obviously, you stick to your word. And you do give them a call on Thursday. Because when you call them, it's easy to say, hey, James, it's Keeley Hubbard. Does the name ring a bell? Right? And you have them start thinking, oh, yeah, we met at the networking event. It makes that conversation easier. But when you get that card, always get a follow-up. If for some reason you're stuck in a conversation with somebody where it's just not, you need to move on to the next one, hopefully this is helpful for you. I've heard somebody say, oh, I always just say I have to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, well, if you don't, first of all, that's a lie. It's a cop-out, right? You're just trying to sneak off and go to the bathroom. And what if they see you in another conversation with someone? So we might as well be transparent and honest and just say, hey, I know you need to get on to the next conversation. I've really enjoyed our discussion. I'd love to follow up further. Do you have a card? So if you find this helpful, give me a yes in the chat box if you're tracking with me. Okay, cool. All right, on to the next one. So number 2, this is a simple, probably pretty short strategy, but it has worked wonders in my life throughout my entire sales career and also just in business in general. So how many of you, and let me know in the chat box, have ever had a phone call scheduled where you blocked off your calendar and you're really strategic with your time and you call that person and they don't pick up the phone? Or maybe even worse, you scheduled a meeting at Starbucks and they don't show up, right? Okay. So let me give you a strategy that I've used that's really easy. So this is going to help you eliminate wasted time. So while you're on the phone with somebody, I always ask them, hey, James, are you looking at your calendar? Make sure, right? You're anchoring their awareness that they should be looking at their calendar. Okay, great. And you coordinate the time. Maybe you say it's Thursday at a specific time. So before you get off the phone, you always want to clarify what day, what time, where are you meeting, or who's calling who. So that could be something as, hey, I've got us on my calendar for Monday the 27th at 2 p.m. I'm going to give you a phone call on your cell. And before I jump off, I would just say, hey, James, are we putting this in pen or pencil? Okay, it's a little tiny strategy that will help you so much because people, it's like, oh no, we're putting this in pen. And if somebody ever says, oh, we're putting it in pencil, I'd say, you know what? Why don't we find a day where we can put it in pen? And it's just that little extra check of they respect your time, you respect theirs, and I promise you it will help prevent those missed appointments, wasted time, frustration. And we don't want to blame people for it. People are busy and maybe they forgot on their calendar. But that's why you got to anchor their awareness first. Are you looking at your calendar? And always ask them at the end, hey, are we putting this in pen or pencil? Okay? All right, give me something in the chat box. Is that helping? You find that useful? Okay, very good. Maybe you can try it with your spouse. You never know. There's all kinds of uses for these things. These are just communication strategies that we want to use in every aspect of our life if it applies. So the next one that I want to talk about is removing pressure, and specifically how to remove sales pressure from a conversation. So when you're talking to investors, like I mentioned before, a lot of times people shy away from raising capital because they don't want to feel like they're pressuring somebody. They don't want to feel like they're pushing this idea on someone. They don't want to create pressure. And whether you're in sales or not, investors most of them are expecting it, right? Like they're waiting for the pitch. We're all consumers, right? Give me a yes in the chat box if you ever bought something in your life. If you ever purchased anything. Yeah, okay, good. I'm talking to the right crowd. So how many of you go into a store and the salesperson walks up to you and they say, hi, I'll use a different name here. Hi, Nicole. How can I help you today? What is everybody's response? Type it in the chat box. What's everybody's response when you go into a store and the salesperson walks up? Yeah, no thanks, I'm just looking, right? It's like we all got on a conference call worldwide and we all agreed that this is how we're going to avoid salespeople. We're going to say, no thanks, I'm just looking. So we don't want to blame consumers. We don't want to blame our investors for having their walls up. Everybody's just trying to avoid the salesperson because everybody's had a bad sales experience before. So what we're trying to do is restore the faith in people that there are good salespeople out there and that sales doesn't have to be a negative experience. So what I want to show you is one of the most powerful strategies that I have used in all my conversations in sales. It's what helped me break records in my sales career. It's what helped me grow the company that I was with. And it's one of the most powerful tools that I teach to business owners and salespeople and multifamily syndicators today. So I want you guys to really pay attention here. When there's pressure, what happens, or there's perceived pressure or anticipated pressure, the anticipated pressure can be more detrimental than actual pressure. It creates this, let me think it over. It creates that objection, or it creates, you know what, let me talk to my husband, or now's not the right time, or let me get back to you. And what I've always taught is that the first objection that somebody gives you is never the real issue. It's not. Objections are something that people use when they're uncomfortable because they're feeling pressure from a salesperson or they're anticipating pressure from a salesperson. Okay, give me a yes in the chat box if you're tracking with me. Does this make sense? We've got to make sure that we are completely removing all that pressure from our conversations. And it's a very simple way that we do that. And I call it setting clear expectations. So before we ever go into this conversation, and this could be done over the phone, it could be done in person. But we want to make sure that they know they're allowed to say no. That's all we're doing is we're giving them permission out of the gate to tell us no. And this is the exact opposite of what most salespeople have been taught in their sales training. They've always been taught, be really friendly, be super knowledgeable about your product. And, as soon as they give you an objection, you overcome it. And then they give you another objection and you overcome it. And it's this crazy cycle where we're not even having an honest conversation anymore because people just have their walls up. When they have their walls up, we can't help them. So here's what that might look like. So if James and I are sitting down and we're talking about multifamily, and he's not really that familiar with it, but he is interested in hearing what I have to say, I would just say, James, do you mind if I tell you a little bit about how these meetings typically go, just so you know what to expect? People need to know what to expect. They'll always say yes. When people don't know what to expect, they get uncomfortable. Give me a yes in the chat box. If you've ever found yourself stuck in a salesperson's office, maybe at the car dealership, or you got trapped at the kiosk in the middle of the mall, and all you're thinking to yourself is, how did I get here? What just happened? How long am I going to be here? And what's this conversation about? So that's what we're trying to avoid. So I tell James, you mind if I tell you a little bit about how these conversations go, just so you know what to expect? And he says yes. And I say, okay, great. We'll spend probably the next 20, 25 minutes. I'm going to explain to you these multifamily investments, the type of investors that I work with, what the potential returns look like, how the deals are structured, why people invest in these in the first place. And at some point in the conversation, you'll naturally come to a conclusion of whether this makes sense for you or not. And you may decide, hey, Keeley, this just isn't the right fit based on my goals and what I'm looking for. My question is, are you going to be comfortable telling me that? So do you see how we're going for the no first, right? We're giving James permission to tell me no if it's not a good fit. And he'll probably say, yeah, I'll tell you. I always double check and I say, are you sure about that? I mean, you seem like a really nice guy. He'll say, no, I'll let you know if it's not a good fit. Okay, great. So we've gotten them to say no twice. And all we're doing here is we're just trying to get everybody's walls down so we can have an open and honest conversation with each other, because it may not be a good fit. But wouldn't it be nice to know that? Wouldn't it be nice to know that it's not a good fit instead of us putting James in our database and nagging him and following up with him when he never wanted to deal with us in the first place, but he was too polite to tell us no? Wouldn't it be nice to have a clean database of people that we can actually help? Give me a yes in the chat box. Y'all are understanding this? We track and we go for the no twice, okay? And then after that, and he says, yeah, no, I'll tell you no if it's not a good fit. Okay, great. The flip side of that is, maybe we get through this conversation and you say, you know what, I think this could help my family achieve our financial goals. And if that's the case, we can figure out what those next steps look like together. Are you comfortable with that? Now, there's one word in there that I said, we can figure out what those next steps look like together. Because these conversations and these agreements, they're mutual. Most salespeople just force it down the investor's throat, right? Let me tell them all the most amazing things about these investments and get them to say yes. And people are listening and they're giving you the smiling, nodding faces, right? And they're acting really interested because as consumers, we've been trained how to treat salespeople. We even ask for their business cards. Has anybody ever gotten a salesperson's business card and thrown it away immediately when you walked out of the store? Let's all be honest here. I've done it and I'm in sales. I've done it. But we do that because we feel bad and it's like, okay, well, I'm never coming back here, but I'll make him feel okay. I'll let him down easy and I'll ask for the business card knowing that you're never, ever going to see him again. So all we're trying to do here is we're just trying to bring walls down. We're trying to get people comfortable so we can have open and honest conversations, disarmingly honest conversations about their investments right now, what they like, what they don't like, what they're hoping to accomplish and achieve. We're not sitting down with them to tell them how amazing multifamily is, because that's traditional salesperson behavior. And when we do that, it triggers this response in people where they start treating you like a typical salesperson. So that's all that we're trying to avoid here. So what I want you to capture from this is give people permission to tell you no. And the more people that tell you no, it's easier to get to a yes. I've always taught my salespeople that. I say the sale begins as soon as your prospect tells you no, because then we can figure out what are the real issues, right? We want people to tell us no. We want to be able to keep a clean pipeline, and we want to find who are the people that we can actually help. So hearing no is a good thing. And I want you guys to get used to it. It doesn't mean that you're a failure. Doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with your multifamily business. It just means that this is not somebody that has the problems that I can fix. Does that make sense? We're looking for people that have problems that we can fix. Okay? All right, I know I'm blowing through these, but I want you to give me a yes in the chat box if you're tracking with me and if that makes sense and you're clear. Just want to make sure I'm not going too fast. Okay, good. Y'all are awesome. So the next thing I want to cover is buyer psychology or consumer psychology, because if you can understand how people think, then you will be an incredible communicator. Because a lot of times what people are telling you, what's coming out of their mouth is not the real issue. It's not the real need or desire. There's a much deeper lying issue underneath that. And I remember at one point in my career, I had a sales coach for years. I believe in mentors. I have multiple mentors, and I'm always looking for somebody that can pull me up to the next level. And my sales coach is named Adam. He was brilliant. And I asked him, I said, I've kind of gotten to a point in my career where I feel like I'm doing really well, but how do I break through to the next level? What do I focus on? And he said, I want you to focus on psychology. Why people think and do the things they do, why they act and behave the way that they act. Because if you can understand that, you can learn to read people, not read people in a manipulative way, but you're hearing the words that's coming out of their mouth, but you can anticipate what's really going on in their head that they're not comfortable telling you. And if you can get to a place where you're comfortable bringing that out, now we can have a real conversation about what's going on. So in terms of buyer psychology, there's really 3 reasons that somebody would buy anything: a mattress, a car, a pair of shoes, obviously invest in multifamily. There's 3 primary reasons. And the first one is pain that they're experiencing in the present. Okay, so somebody has gone through a job loss. The market, let's say the stock market was down, for example, 10, 15%, like we've seen in some of these crazy days, right? They're experiencing pain in the present. They're watching their retirement accounts go down. The second one is pain in the future, and it's really that fear of pain in the future. People that have gone through the 2008 market crash that wiped out half of their life savings. Most of the investors, I don't know about you guys, but most of the investors that we work with are the baby boomer generation, and they've been through a market crash. Some of them have been through 2 market crashes in their lifetime, right? They've been through 2000, they've been through 2008, and now here we are, 2020, and they're trying to play catch up to get on track for retirement. So their concern might be, I don't want that to happen again in the future. I need to find a way to safeguard my investments. And the third one is the opposite. It's pleasure or gain. So out of these 3, I want you to type in the chat box, which one is the most motivating reason for somebody to change their decision-making, change their life, buy any product? If you had to pick one, 2, or 3. Yes, y'all are doing good. So it's pain in the present, okay? It's pain in the present. Now, I want you to think about it this way. If we're going to compare number 1 and 3, because sometimes I hear the number 3, and here's the challenge. As salespeople, we've been taught to talk about all the amazing things about our product, right? Let me show you all the features and benefits, why multifamily is so amazing. I have to hold that stuff back too, because we know that at our core. We know it's amazing. The problem is the minute we start acting like the typical salesperson, the walls go up. And we're not having a disarmingly honest conversation anymore because our investor is feeling like, oh, geez, here comes the pitch or here comes the pressure. So if we were to compare number 1 and 3 in terms of buying a car, let's say that you have an amazing car right now and you drive by the dealership and you're like, you know what? I think I'm going to upgrade. I'm just going to pull in an upgrade. And I did this one day years ago, back when I was young and dumb with my money. And I pulled into the car dealership and I was like, oh, today's the day for an upgrade, right? And you go in there and you test drive the car. You already have a car that's great, right? But you're thinking, I need the brand new one, or I need the next model up. Is there motivation to make that decision right now? If I'm seeking pleasure or gain, I'm looking for that upgrade. Is there true motivation or urgency? Is there urgency for me to do it right now? Do I have to upgrade my car right now? Or could I make the decision a week from now? Yeah, a year from now? Yeah, not really. Now, flip it. What if I didn't have a car? What if I totaled my car, didn't have insurance, I got to get to work somehow. All of a sudden, I've got pain in the present. And so I have to go buy a car. Is there urgency for me to make that decision if I have to buy the car to get to work? Yeah, there is. So think about it this way. If there was guilt associated with number 1 or 3, which one would it be? Would I feel guilty for upgrading my car when I already have a great car? Or would I feel guilty for buying a car when I don't have one at all and I got to get to work? Where's the guilt associated? Yes, number 3. So here's the problem with number 3. Yes, we want to make sure that we explain the benefits and all the great things about multifamily, but the problem is there is zero urgency when you try to sell based on, look at all the money that you can make. Because somebody can double their net worth. They could make that decision a year from now. They don't have to do it right now. So what I want you to realize is if the number 1 motivating reason for somebody to buy anything, to make a decision, to change, we've got to figure out, am I talking to somebody that has the problems that I fix? And do they have pain in the present? Pain in the present's number one. If it's that fear of pain in the future, then that's just as good. So I want you to remember this. I learned this in sales from the very beginning. It was really no pain, no sale, but I put here no pain, no change, no investment. And it doesn't mean that we are inflicting pain, right? Because we sell ethically. What we're trying to figure out is we're trying to discover pain. What are their needs? Are they dissatisfied with their current investments? So let me give you some questions that you can ask that will help guide the conversation, because a lot of times we go into these conversations, we don't set clear expectations, and we just bulldoze them with here's all the amazing things about multifamily, and we pull up a slideshow on our laptop without ever anchoring their awareness of why this could help them. So we got to start out with some questions and say, James, do you mind if I ask you some questions just so I can better understand your world? Everybody that I've talked to, every investor has always said, yeah, sure, no problem. And so here's some of those questions that I want you to ask. What are some of the challenges that you've experienced with your other investments? And if you want an easier way to kind of intro into this, a great way is using third-party stories or just talking about other investors in general. So you could say, James, a lot of investors that I work with are playing catch up when their retirement accounts, they're trying to make sure that they're safeguarding their money and that they're growing at a faster rate than what they've been getting in the stock market. I've got other investors that are just wanting to diversify their portfolio to make sure their money is protected. I don't suppose those have been concerns of yours. Now, do y'all notice how I phrased the question at the end? I didn't say, James, are those concerns of yours? Because it sounds like a setup question, right? It's typical salesperson behavior. So instead I said, I don't suppose those have been concerns of yours, because I don't know, right? That's why I'm asking the question. So I got to figure out what are some of the challenges that you've experienced with your investments and give them some examples of other issues that your other investors have dealt with. Think about investors that you've talked to. Why are they upset? Why are they getting out of the stock market? Or why are they getting out of hotel investing and moving into multifamily or whatever it is? Think about those pain points. Give them some of those as examples. The investors that I work with are really frustrated, with their, the performance of their retirement accounts. That's why they're looking at multifamily. And I don't suppose that's been a challenge for you. So it's a great way to kind of introduce the conversation. And your goal when you're discovering pain or their needs, you're trying to figure out, number one, do they have it? Right? Are they a qualified investor? Are they somebody that needs your help? And you're trying to figure out, is it something that's going on right now in the present? And again, if a lot of these deals that you're doing are 506Bs, we have to know our investors anyways, right? And if we're doing 506Cs, we also need to understand our accredited investors. We're doing people a disservice if we don't understand what their needs are. One of my mentor, Adam, he said, pitching a solution to somebody without understanding their needs is sales malpractice, right? So we'd say syndicator malpractice if we're pitching them on this deal and we don't even understand what their issues are. So our goal here is to get to know them, learn what their challenges are. Another great question that I love to ask is, in a perfect world, like if they say, yeah, I've been riding a roller coaster in my stock portfolio. It's like, yeah, I hear you. A lot of my investors have said that. It's been crazy. In a perfect world, how would you expect your investments to perform? It's one of my favorite questions because you can figure out, what their expectations are and what they're currently getting, what the gap is. So it's a great question to ask. Here's another one. It's just a prompt. Help me understand or tell me more. And a lot of times these conversations, we just want to talk. Whoever's talking is the one that's being sold. Whoever's doing all the talking is the one that's being sold, okay? And it's not that we're selling our investor or we're doing any harm to them, but we're trying to understand where they're coming from. And if we're sitting here doing all the talking, we're being sold on our own system, our own traditional salesperson junk, and when we do that behavior, people start to shut down, okay? Give me a yes in the chat box. Are you tracking with me? I'm trying to stay high level to where you get it and give you some tangibles. Okay, good. Y'all are doing awesome. And I know I talk fast, so I apologize in advance for that. It's just a part of my nature. So let me give you a couple more questions here. I'd love to ask people, hey, have you ever tried to fix it? Right? With their stock portfolio, have you ever tried to fix it? If they expected their investments to perform, at 8% a year, and they've been riding this roller coaster, ask them, have you ever looked at alternatives? Have you ever tried to fix it? And if they say yes, yeah, I invested in a multifamily deal, I'll say, oh, well, tell me more about that. Right? Remember that prompt, or help me understand, how did that go? Because wouldn't you want to know if they had invested in a multifamily deal that went south, before you pitch them on yours? Wouldn't that be helpful information for you to understand exactly what went wrong? So you can explain to them and use your knowledge on what happened there and how your investment's different. If that would be helpful, give me a yes in the chat box. These are why we ask these questions, to understand where our investors sit, with their current investments. And I always ask this, right? From a priority standpoint, how important is it to fix? And I'm okay with wherever you're at. I just want to understand from your perspective, is this something you want to deal with a year from now, 2 years from now, or is it something you're trying to fix right away? Because how helpful would it be to understand what somebody's priority is in fixing the problem? Because if you have somebody who's, maybe they've invested in some hedge fund and they're getting 40% a year, returns, they've been doing that for the last 2 or 3 years, we already know that we're in that number 3 bucket. We're in the pleasure gain, right? There's not a lot of pain in the present. There's not a lot of fear of pain in the future. So we already know we may not have a lot of urgency with this person to make a decision right now. So we're just trying to figure out, where do people stand and what are their needs? Something else that I like to ask in this one, write down softening statements. This one requires a softening statement because it is a tough question. But if you truly care about people and you care about helping them and what you do, you'll soften these statements with them. And I just say, hey, James, I got to ask you a tough question. And they always look at, right? Now you've anchored their awareness, like, what is she going to ask me? I'm like, let's pretend you do nothing. What happens? Because if we've got some pain and if we've got some fear of what could happen in the future if they don't make a change, if they don't make a decision to move things forward, it's important that we ask that question, because a lot of times people don't know what their challenges are, right? You're helping them talk through their issues with their investments and figuring out, is it important enough to fix from a priority standpoint? And also giving them the alternative where they can figure out, if I didn't do anything, what would happen? Is this making sense? You're with me? All right. Okay, good. Y'all are awesome. I know you're probably tired of typing the word yes. You don't have to type the word yes anymore. You can just do that crazy thing on the keyboard that kids do, hit whatever keys you want, just so I know you're out there. We all love to do that, right? Okay. And this is the last thing I'm going to give you. I know I've been like overload on tips and strategies. Yeah, there you go. Isn't that fun? Yeah, just hit whatever you want on the keyboard. So let me know you're out there. A lot of people ask me, how do I talk to my friends and family about this without them feeling like, here we go, right? What's Keeley up to now? It's another business venture, or it's another investment venture, investment opportunity. And I want to give you a talk track of something that I've used and I've helped other people use that's been super successful. And it helps your friends and family members understand that you've got their best interests at heart, which is why you're wanting to talk to them about it. And it's something as simple as this. I'd say, hey, James, I wanted to update you on some things I've been building in the real estate investment world. It may not be a good fit for you at all, right? This is where we kind of take it away, like we're removing the pressure. That's the strategy here. It may not be a good fit for you at all, but I'd hate for you to hear about it after the fact and be upset with me for not sharing it with you. You want to grab coffee? We can sit down and talk about it. So it's an easy way to introduce it to your friends and family in a way that you're saying, I just don't want you to be upset with me if you hear about it after the fact and I never called you or I never let you know what I was up to. So it's a super simple way to get your friends and family involved, at least understanding what you're up to in the real estate world. All right, that was 5 things and I went a little bit over on time, but I hope it was helpful for you. So what I want to ask you here is, what's your massive action plan? And a lot of times a massive action plan is just, what are 1 or 2 things that you're going to implement right away in your business that's going to make a difference in what you're doing? Because it makes no sense for all of us to sit here and for you to listen to me talk for 40 minutes or however long it was if you don't take something away and take action on it and implement it. So I want you to give me the number in the chat box, which one you think is going to be the most helpful, whether it's networking tips, how to solidify your appointments, right? Are we putting this in pen or pencil? Going for the no first, giving them permission to say no, talking about their challenges and their pain points, or talking to your family. All right, I'm getting some good numbers in here. Perfect. Y'all are rocking it. Some of you said all of them. I love it. You're overachievers. Cool. Okay, good. Well, I'm so glad you found this helpful. So grab a pen if you don't have one right now. I need you to write something down because I promised you I'd give you the playbook. So I'm going to do that, and it's got my slides in there, plus it's got the talk tracks if you weren't able to write all that down. But I want you to really practice these questions. I want you to practice going for the no and setting clear expectations so it comes across conversational and it feels natural to you. So all you've got to do is just shoot me an email, contact@KeeleyHubbard.com, and I will be up late tonight, so I will send it back to you in email. It should hit your inbox and not go to spam if you email me first, so we won't have to deal with that issue. But yeah, shoot me an email and send it to you. I had a ton of fun. James, thank you for having me on. I hope you guys found this helpful. Thank you.
That was awesome. Nice job. Really, really well done. I learned it. I've got probably 4 pages of notes here. I know you told us not to take notes, and I don't. If you want to stop, do you want to stop sharing? Can you stop sharing on your end? But I took a bunch of notes, and that is phenomenal. The offer you're giving people to get the talk tracks. I know you do talk fast. I thought I talked fast, but you talk very fast. And I'm also a extroverted introvert, so it's pretty funny. We're also going to send out a couple of links for the recording. We're actually recording this right now. We'll have them on our Facebook page, and we'll have them on our YouTube page. So take a look for that. So questions. What kind of questions do you guys have for Keeley that we can answer for you? Just put it in the chat box. Or maybe people are just overwhelmed.
Brain spinning.
Got good stuff here. Say great content, great stuff. Learned a lot. Thank you. Thanks, y'all. Oh, that's you.
That was me.
So you see this one, outside of real estate events, what networking events would you recommend to find more investors? Great question.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I've started with the Chamber of Commerce. Just within the Chamber of Commerce, you often find other business groups and business networking groups that are out there. I always prefer to kind of niche down. If you can find a niche world of investors that you really connect with, maybe it's moms in their 40s that have kids and they're building, they're trying to build their investments. A lot of times women are in charge of the money in the household, these days. It's just the reality of it. So if you can find a way to connect with, groups like that, I always ask around too. I ask around from people that I've met and say, hey, who do you know? Are there groups out there that focus on, finances or, anybody that's trying to improve their retirement accounts? I found great groups through like the City Club here in Fort Worth, just inside of those actual clubs. So if you dig around, they're out there, and you can often find a lot of times events like this, like what James is doing, meetup groups, where you find business owners. Business owners will always, I want to say always, but will typically have funds, whether they're accredited through their net worth, they're usually accredited through their income. So they're great sources and places to find investors, and they're always thinking about their money. So you can find business owner groups.
That's great. Good stuff.
Yeah.
How do you go about finding equity or JV in the market? I'm not sure.
You mean for as far as like accredited investors? For any equity? I mean, JV equity, a lot of time it is networking. I've met more people through Facebook and LinkedIn, in the real estate world than I ever thought that I would. But a lot of times you'll connect with people. I would always encourage you to reach out and send a message, say, hey, I noticed we have a lot of friends in common, or hey, I see that you're in the real estate space. Tell me more about what you do, and find a way to set up a meeting after that. I've talked to so many people from Bigger Pockets. I've gotten probably 5 investors over the last 2 months just from Bigger Pockets alone, posting on forums, being active on forums in Bigger Pockets, not pitching, don't pitch, right? But provide value. If you can always offer value, people will reach out to you. And I get a lot of phone calls or direct messages just from that. Find a way to offer value in the marketplace.
That's great. Somebody else is asking, quote, you don't try to overcome objections. What do you do when you actually do get an objection?
That is a great question. So I always focus on preventing them, because a lot of times people wait until the very end of a conversation or the very end of the process, where now it's time for your investor to make a decision, yes or no. And then all of a sudden the objections start coming out. So imagine if we could prevent those by having those conversations up front. And so after we go through kind of the needs and the pain conversation, so I can figure out, what is their motivation to want to invest. After that, I've got to figure out how do they make decisions about money, right? And so if we've got to talk money, I'm going to give you this is a bonus tip, And it's not in the playbook, so you are going to want to write this down. But one of the easiest ways to introduce the conversation about money and investments, I would say, James, obviously, you know, these types of deals that we do, there's minimum investments involved and, you know, different types of accounts that you can use. But before we discuss that, I mean, how do we talk about money in a way that makes you feel comfortable? That's what I want you to write down, is how do we talk about money in a way that makes you feel comfortable? How many people have ever had a salesperson ask them that? At the car dealership, Keeley, how do we talk about money? They never say that, right? They just dive right into money, or they wait until the very end. And you need to know up front what's most important to people when they make decisions about their investments, because that will give you a lot of insight into objections that could pop up later that you could have diffused it early on. The other one is the decision maker objection. Are you involving decision makers from the beginning? So I would say, James, a lot of people that I work with will tell me, Keeley, I need to involve my spouse, my significant other, my partner in this conversation, you know, discussing money. Is there anybody that comes to mind that we should be talking to as well? That's a decision maker, a potential decision maker objection. You don't want to do all this work and all of a sudden you get to the very end and it's like, well, let me talk to my wife, and wife kills the deal or kills the investment and you never got to talk to her. So if you can talk to the two of them together and meet with both of them together and set that up, I would even say, James, a lot of people ask me when we sit down and have these conversations, hey, can I bring my spouse, partner, significant other, you know, to the meeting so we can all be on the same page? And a lot of times he or she will have more questions. Is that something we should be discussing? So what if we did that on the phone before we ever got to the meeting? So now we're actually meeting with the investor and the other decision maker. So the decision maker can't kill the deal. And usually they kill the deal because they were never involved in the first place. They're upset because they weren't involved in the first place. So we want to bring them in. So those are just two ways that I want you to think about. Instead of overcoming objections, what are the conversations we can have early on that will prevent those from popping up? Make sense?
Good stuff. Another question for you. Are financial advisors good contacts to reach investors? Can they present an offering memo to their clients?
I have not seen success with that because you're competition usually. And if they were, unless they're like a Series 65, you know, and they're independent, maybe they could be a good contact, but they're going to take a cut as well. So can you make that work in your GP-LP split with your numbers? But what I found is you're usually competition to them. You know, my background is the financial markets. My dad was a professional trader since I was a kid. And now we've moved into real estate because the markets have shifted so much. And we used to talk down about real estate, if I'm being transparent, right? Because we wanted people in the financial markets, and that's where the money was being made. So a lot of times financial advisors, there's not enough money for them to make in real estate. They've got to keep their clients invested in the products that they can sell, which is really what they're doing, unless they're an active, you know, registered investment advisor type, type of advisor. But personal experience, not saying don't do it. It's just I haven't found much success with it.
Okay, no, that's great. I'm sure a lot of people have that same question. So we are right on time. It's 7:58. We're going to start the virtual networking in about 2 minutes. So if you have other questions, please feel free to ask them now, and we can try and get them taken care of for everybody. And while we're waiting for that, I'll just give it a couple of seconds here. All right, so I have a question actually. So you've done a tremendous job. You've given everybody a ton of information. I'm sure that people are a little overwhelmed, and a lot of people want to do a really, really good job when they sit down with their investors. They want to have it perfect. It's like, I got to have my deal down perfect before I walk out the door, and then 6 months later, they're still trying to practice it. So what do you recommend to people that are in that position? How do they get, launched? How do they get moving without saying, I've got to be perfect?
I would say perfect and ready is a lie, right? And it causes us to procrastinate when really the issue is we're fearful of moving out of our comfort zone. And what I want you to realize is that no's are still wins. When investors say no to you, I used to high five my sales team when they would lose a deal, to reprogram their mindset that you're going to lose deals, right? You're going to fall flat on your face in conversations. You're going to lose investments. You're going to go in thinking that you've got a $500,000 investor and you don't get it. And I want you to celebrate those losses if you learn something from it, right? If you can pull something from it. Man, what did I miss? I didn't talk about their needs. I didn't go through. I didn't find, is there urgency? Is there a real pain point there? Or maybe they felt pressure because we didn't set the conversation up and give them permission to say no. And the other thing that I will tell you is the less scripted that you can be in a meeting, the more successful you're going to be. People do not like slick salespeople. They don't. My coach, my sales coach, Adam, he would go in and meet with CEOs and he would sell sales training to big organizations, right? We're talking enterprise selling, big stuff. Every time he went in to meet with a CEO, he would forget his pen on purpose. He would not bring his pen with him because he didn't want to come in looking perfect, and he would not wear a suit, right? You can picture the typical salesperson, right? Where they got everything figured out, and he would go and he's like, man, I did it again. He's like, do you have a pen I can borrow? And all of a sudden you're human, right? And you're having a human conversation. So I would tell you, be yourself. That's what people want. They don't want the perfectly scripted person. Go out there, start talking to people, and you will learn as you go. You'll have great conversations. You'll meet great investors, and you'll be doing them a great service by just being you, being passionate about what you do, but truly getting to know them. I'll give you one more tip that my coach taught me when I first started out. He said, stop looking in people's pockets for money. Start trying to understand them as a person, right? Like their friend or their family or their close loved one, and the money will come if you understand them as a person and what their needs are. So be human, be yourself, and get out there and start failing, because that's what's going to propel you forward.
All right, one last question. Can I do this with my IRA?
Do what specifically? Invest? Charles, give me a little bit of clarity there, if you can. Yes, can you invest with your IRA? Yes, you can invest with a self-directed IRA. I'm not your expert on that. I actually have an expert that I work with for our investors that use those funds. James, do you have somebody, or if not, I've got a good resource for it.
We've got a couple people. If you have a resource, send it to me. I'll be more than happy to send it out. If you guys have questions, we got a couple of people we work with and we've had great success with. But it's always nice to have extra. You know, somebody may not click with you, so it's always nice to have somebody else you can talk to if the first person doesn't work out for you.